Hey guys, welcome to Boxing Squared for boxing news and views from around the internet. Beaten heavyweight contender Dillian Whyte is drawing a line under his loss to Alexander Povetkin, looking ahead to a rematch which he says he'd like to have in either November or December. So we'll get to his video statement and then on to a couple of other things, because a lot of fans in particular, as well as some fighters and even sort of managers and promoters, have been looking to take their pound of flesh for Dillian Whyte. And that's obviously for a number of reasons, some of which is Dillian Whyte is one of the biggest trash talkers in the division. There was always going to be some comeuppance, but yeah, we'll get on to that. But first, Dillian Whyte reflecting on this loss in a video statement.
Hey everyone, just want to let you guys know I'm safe, I'm sound, and I'm good. And so firstly, congratulations to Alexander Povetkin on a great fight. I look forward to doing it again. And yeah, I'm good. Safe, thanks for all the nice messages and stuff. It's heavyweight boxing, it happens. If you fight good fighters, you win some, you lose some. You will get stopped, you will get knocked out, you will get dropped. You know, as you can see, happened to multiple fighters. I don't think all happen to. So yeah, I'm all good. I'm ready for the rematch. Hopefully, God willing, we can get the rematch done for November, December time. Let's go. I'm ready. You know, I spoke to Eddie this morning and he's on it.
So overall, Dillian Whyte, relatively humble, looking forward, saying it is basically one of these things and he's ready to get back to work, bounce back. And on the strength of his performance, the boxing effort, and what he was actually doing in there, he knows he has the power to hurt Alexander Povetkin, to put him down, and obviously control a fight for stretches of it. So I think he will, you know, apart from this knockout, which was clearly a massive blow for him and led to a very sort of high-profile defeat, what probably knockout of the year so far. He is thinking that it was just one of those things. And I guess mentally, he will need to do that to some extent, because if he truly starts to analyze or overanalyze things and thinks that Povetkin is just going to have it all over him every time, when that could start eating away at his confidence. But right from the outset, and you know, right in the post-fight interviews when he came up to Eddie Hearn, he said it was just one of those things, and reiterating it here. And I truly believe he will think that he's got the better of Povetkin 9 times out of 10. He will think that this was just that one unlucky time, even though it wasn't an unlucky punch. As Johnny Nelson had said, it was a lucky punch, but clearly it was a beautifully timed and placed punch by Povetkin, one of those things where he was training for. So Whyte has to go back to the drawing board. Clearly the uppercut is something he's going to have to come up with a strategy or a plan to avoid. But as we saw in that fight, Povetkin was working well to the body. Whyte was wary of the body work, and he was bringing his elbows down at the point that Povetkin was starting to wind up for that punch, Whyte thinking he was going to take one to the body. Clearly he didn't, miscalculated, brought the elbows down along with the hands coming with them, and he was taken out. He was sat down, and it wasn't on this chair in this little graphic that I've got up on screen. He was out on the canvas. But yeah, I'm sure Dillian Whyte, on the strength of what he did, you know, clearly others would have told him, look, you were actually fighting well. You had the better of him. You were controlling the fight. But there are obviously things he can look to do different and better for a rematch. Clearly, Alexander Povetkin still had some snap in his punches, and Dillian Whyte, you can argue perhaps he was a little too aggressive too soon. And that has been contrasted by some comments elsewhere by the likes of Anthony Joshua, who've said he should have finished Povetkin off when he sort of had him hurt. But I don't think Povetkin was hurt to the point where you could just risk going in there and wildly sort of flailing away trying to get him out of there. And remembering the second knockdown in the 4th round, that happened only about 15 seconds out from the bell, so limited opportunity to get in there and finish the job. But Dillian Whyte will fancy his chances in what is going to be a much bigger rematch. There's going to be a lot of eyes, a lot of interest in this rematch. There is a number of people writing off Alexander Povetkin's chances ahead of this first fight. So for the rematch, it could end up, in one sense, being financially quite lucrative for Dillian Whyte. But someone who's been looking to come in for a pound of flesh over this rematch issue is David Higgins, who Joseph Parker's former promoter now manages and advises Joseph Parker. So on social media, he's been quite vocal about this whole rematch issue, saying, "Funny at Dillian Whyte demands instant rematch after being floored by Povetkin. Conversely, Whyte's win over Joe Boxer Parker was aided by lucky headbutt. Plus, he only just survived the 12th. For 2 years, Dillian Whyte won't discuss that fight or consider the rematch anytime, anywhere." So this is obviously a pointed response from David Higgins, utilising the sort of aftermath to really go after Dillian Whyte and question why the rematch was never granted for Joseph Parker. And he was asked, well, why didn't you negotiate one? And he said they wouldn't give us one. So this situation for matchroom fighters and big fights, it's not unusual to have these one-way rematch clauses. You may recall from a year or so ago, there was one of Katie Taylor's opponents who had a belt and wasn't offered a rematch. And she was crying about that in the sort of build up to the fight. There was a bit of a spat about it. But you can't get those opportunities back. And obviously, if things had turned out different, Joseph Parker's career could have been, going in a very different direction. But as it was, Whyte, who's been down and hurt in a number of fights, kept winning and winning. Ultimately, though, his luck ran out in that fight with Alexander Povetkin. And there's been other heavyweights who've been piling in. As we know, Andy Ruiz Jr. and Dillian Whyte, there is no love lost. And here's an abridged clip from Andy Ruiz Jr. I've had to cut it down a bit more because background music, sometimes you can get in trouble with that. But here's what he had to say about Dillian Whyte.
I was so happy. You know why? Because he doesn't have respect for the fighters. That's what gets me pissed off.
And that sort of sentiment, I've seen a lot of that around in my post-fight review, different live streams and videos that I've done, even in the build-up. Dillian Whyte, a very polarizing character. He has been one of these guys that's built part of his name and reputation through trash talk. He is one of the better guys in the division at it. He uses it as a tool to keep his profile at a certain level and to paint narratives about, what's happening and not happening in his career as it may be. But some people have tired on some of the narratives, sometimes the victim mentality about this 1,000 days and some of the things that have been spun around his career and the goings-on in it. And clearly having trashed a number of fighters quite mercilessly, over the years. Guys like Andy Ruiz Jr., and there's been others too. Fans as well have been piling in too. And I don't necessarily think some of these people, I don't think they hate Dillian Whyte, but there is some irony with some of the stuff that he's been doing, that he's been saying. He's looked past a guy like Alexander Povetkin, and some people just think maybe it's just karma coming back to bite him in this sense. But some of this will dissipate. So it is what it is. You expect this to an extent when a trash talker loses. It kind of blows up in their face. Remember Jarrell Miller a year or so ago? The level of trash talk and the things he was saying to all manner of fighters, including Anthony Joshua, he got it in spades too when he failed those drug tests. And for Dillian Whyte, with the level of talk, the chat that he'd sort of been putting out there, it was bound to catch up with him at some point, just because fighters just don't keep winning forever. Eventually, you're going to take an L, as he has done here. But in terms of his mentality and where he's at, sure, he looks a little bit humbler in that clip, but I think the confidence will come back. He'll lick his wounds for the time being. He'll assess what happened with his team. He'll come back and we'll have the rematch. And I guess the question is, he's talking November or December. November's just a couple of months away, so perhaps that's looking slightly less likely. I mean, I could see December. But when you start doing the maths, remembering it's late August at the point this video is going out, December's not that far away. September, October, November, and December. So 3 months and change, maybe 3.5 months away? That does feel like that would creep up awfully quickly. And if they are to do it in 3.5 months, you'd have to have a pretty quick turnaround and announce that pretty quickly and almost be going back into training camps and maybe another sort of, 2 to 4 weeks or something like that. Maybe because he's just come out of a fight, both these guys, perhaps they'd have a slightly abridged camp, perhaps something like 6 or 8 weeks, something like that. They're already in fight shape. Perhaps they don't need to put in as much time and effort. Remembering Dillian Whyte, his camp for this one, for the first Povetkin fight, was roughly about 6 months because of the pandemic, the lockdown and all that. But perhaps this fight, December, maybe that's just a target at this point. November has been mentioned as well, but it could end up being pushed into 2021. That wouldn't surprise me at all. But what do you make of this situation? Whyte's comment, the trash talk that people are levelling at him, David Higgins, Andy Ruiz Jr, and fans too. Do you think he deserves it? Or have people started to go too far? Or is it just desserts? What do you make of it all? Drop a comment, loud and often. Hit like, hit subscribe. Follow me on Twitter, boxing_squared. I'm out.